In this video clip, we're going to take a look at how we can use styles to lay out our web page. If you notice, a lot of web pages have sort of like a header area where they have maybe a banner or a logo at the top. Maybe they have a horizontal menu going across, and then they maybe have some content below that, and that content could be divided into maybe one or more columns, and then you might have a footer sort of at the bottom of your page, right? So what we're going to look at is using the div tag and laying out what we call div blocks, and then using styles to make it take on this shape. So we'll have a div block for a tag to lay out the div wrapper, which will sort of encompass or enclose all the other div blocks. And this is how we're going to try and lay it out. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to go with this one. And then once you get this format down, you can use div blocks and move them around and lay out your page any way you want. Now what I've done is I've gone into Expression Web and just created a new site, and I have a new page here, default HTML. And what we'll do is we'll use internal styles first, and then we'll move it to make it an external style sheet. But it'll be easier if it's all in one place, I think, to see. So what we'll do is we'll create a div block, and we'll give it use the ID attribute, and we'll call it div wrapper. Okay, so this will sort of wrap around our whole page. Okay, and then inside that one we'll indent, and it's important to indent so you can see, you know, how your layout looks. It's easier to read your code this way. We'll call it div header, right? And then we'll keep it simple. We won't put a menu bar in. Let's just put it in content. And so we'll do div ID, and then we'll just call it div content, right? We'll do a couple of these and see how they look. Right, and then last we'll do div footer, right? Div footer in quotes. All right. So these are just HTML tags, and we've used the ID attribute on them. Now, so that we can see sort of what what's going to be in there, let's just put in here, you know, heading area, right? You know, content area. I'll just have it in content area, and then footer area. All right. Now we'll preview this in the browser and see what it looks like. Let's save it. Preview it in the browser, and you can see nothing spectacular, right? It just looks like that. So our job is to make it look a lot nicer. So let's try it. So what we'll do is let's create a style block up here. This will be an internal style block, right? Internal styles, and eventually, you know, you want to move it to make it external, which we'll try and do if we have time in this video clip. And so what I'll do is, let's say for the body, this will be a style just in the body. I like to kind of make sure I have the right font, so I'm going to make sure my font size is medium for everything on the page, right? And I like a certain font family, so it's just, I'm going to use the Calibri font, right? And also say Calibri, comma sans serif, right? And then that'll be for the body tag. Now let's look at the div wrapper. So I'm going to do #. Remember we talked about how to use the ID of the ID attribute of a tag and style that. And remember that you can only use this ID once. Like div content, I couldn't create another div block and have an ID called div content. This has to be unique to the page. Notice when I do the # and start typing, the IntelliSense picks up all the IDs that are currently there. Right? This would happen pretty much in any editor you use. So I'll use header, or actually I want wrapper first. And what I'm going to do here is style this. So what I'm going to do is let's set the width to say 600 pixels, and let's say the height to 500 pixels. Now you could do this proportionately, right? You could have the width, you know, 80% of the page, 90% of the page. You could do that too, but I'll use a fixed one here. And now we're going to do something called margin : auto, which will automatically center the div block for us in the middle of the page. And just so we can see it, let's put a border on it. So we'll put border, and this is the shortcut method for the border, right? I could put border dash left, border dash top, and so on, but I'm just going to use the shortcut method. You can take a look at that online at W3 Schools on what that means, or in your textbook. But I'm going to use 1 pixel. It prompts me for thin, but I find that in Firefox, thin is thicker than 1 pixel, at least it seems that way. And then I'll choose a color for my border and what type of style for the border. Alright, so now if I just refresh this or save it, and if I'm down here, I think I can just look at it again. So I hit refresh. What's it look like? Now I've got a border around here. You can see it's centered. It's starting to look a little bit better, right? So what I can do next is, and let's do the header. And this is, you know, things that you should try, like trial and error. You put a style in and take a look at it, and that's kind of how you learn to see what it, you know, what it looks like. Now the header, remember, is going to be inside the wrapper, so we can say that it's going to take up 100% of the width of the wrapper. So here we could use a percentage if we want, right? Or you could actually put the same pixels in there. I do a percentage. How high do we want the header area? You know, what's the height? We're going to have a logo in there, any kind of text. Let's start off with maybe making it 100 pixels. All right. All right. Now there's another style that you want to use. There's position, right? The position. So how is this div block going to be positioned relative to the wrapper div block? Well, that's just it. Do we want it at a fixed location, which would mean you know, or an absolute location, which would mean it would be absolute to the top and left side of the page, or do we want it relative to the last div block? And that's what we'll usually choose, is relative. We want this to line up relative to where the last div block is. So it's 100% of width inside the div wrapper. And then the other tag that usually, or style that usually goes with this, is float left. We want everything to sort of float to the left. All right. And not that it's going to matter much in this example, because everything's going to take up 100% of our, you know, the width will be 100% inside the div wrapper. But if you had columns, you would want them to sort of float to the left. We'll try and point that out in another video clip. So the header, let's give it a, we can give it a bottom border if we want, or a color. We'll just do a bottom border first. So border dash bottom, right? And we'll just say 1 pixel, black, and we'll say, you know, solid, right? So we'll do that, okay? And now let's just see what it looks like. We'll refresh. There we go. Now we have that in there. Now we could center the text. We could make the text a little larger, that sort of thing. So let's do something for the div, for the content area. So we'll just do div content. Oops. Use the IntelliSense. Again, the width would be 100%. I'm using lowercase here. Notice too, some of you make sure you use lower. The convention is lowercase for HTML and style sheets in your style. Some of you used uppercase before, so you want to use lowercase, and you want to indent like this if you can. Height. How much should the height of the body be? Well, remember, since we have a fixed height, it should match or be no bigger than the wrapper height, because the wrapper encloses all these div blocks, right? So if the header is 100, you know, maybe we make this 375, and then we could have 25 for the footer. Is that right? And then we also want to do position relative float left, because this is relative to the header div block. All right, let's put this in here. And we could also put a border on this so that we can see the bottom of it. And you could change this up. Maybe you want to put a border on the top of the footer instead. Or not. Maybe you don't put any borders, but we just want to lay it out so we can see what's going on. So then if I refresh this, and again, there it is, right? Now we will put a footer content in here as well, or footer style, just so we have it. So we'll do this, div footer, right? And we'll make it the width 100%, right? And we'll make the height, we'll make it explicit so we know. 25 pixels. Let's just see. We probably have an error here, and I'll figure out what that is in a minute. Float left, right? We don't need to put a border on it, but we might want to start putting a background color on some things. So this shouldn't really change anything. Let's take a look. Hit refresh. Yeah, it's the same thing, right? Now let's put some border. Let's put some colors in there. So maybe the header and the footer, we want the same color. So if I do background color. And you can do background or color. I do background dash color in this IntelliSense. It gives me the list, or I can pick a color, right, from the I guess the color wheel. Let's make it maybe I want a dark color, sort of a dark color, and we'll have white text on it. So we'll do that, and we'll make the color of the text white, right? And let's make, we'll have both the header and the footer with the same style and make it match, right? There we go. Alright, so there we go. We can have this like that, okay, and we preview this in the browser. What's it look like? There we go. Now we really don't need the borders, right, at this point, but there you go. So you can see, you know, how you could line this up, right? And then you could use the span tag if you want to. Span tag is a do nothing tag. It doesn't it's not a block type tag, meaning there's no height and width to it, unlike the div block, right, where you have height and width to a div block. But in the span tag, for instance, and I could put this down here, I could make all span. If I just did this, right, it would be style would apply to all spans. Or I could create a class, right, for all types of headings. So let's just do, you know, main heading. Maybe this is my main heading class that I could use over and over again in different areas of my page. And maybe I want the text alignment to be center, right? Text align center. And maybe I want the font to be bold, font weight to be bold, right? Dash weight to be bold. We can spell that, okay. And we'll make it bold. And then the font size. Let's do font size. And we want that to be extra large, maybe. Right. So now we have to put it on the span tag right here. So we'll just say what class equals, and notice it comes up because it's already in the style block that we have up there. Save this, refresh. Oops, it didn't center it. I have something wrong here. Text align center. It should have. Oh, because of the width. It didn't have a width to do it with. Okay, because it's not a. It's not. There's no width to the span tag. So we set up a width. I don't know if we can do this or not 100%. Let's try this and save it. Okay. So there's an error right there. Yeah. So there's different ways you'd have to do the width if you want to center that. All right. So to do that, let me come back here again and change it up. What you might want to do in this case is just set it for the whole header area. You could just say text, because you might want everything there anyway, aligned that way. Or you could put another div block in there and do it with a div block, but you can't do it with a span tag. So now that I've changed it in the header block, div block, and refreshed it, right, and refreshed, there it goes. And you could do the same thing with the footer. So that's video 1 in page layout. We'll do a few more.